Here we are at Walla Airport, and we're here with the Wings of Freedom tour. This is a nationwide, national 110-city nationwide tour of the B17 Flying Fortress behind me, the B24 Liberator, and the P51 Mustang as part of the tour. We also have the B25 Mitchell here today, which is kind of a unique thing because we don't bring the B25 out very often, but we have a chance to bring it out this time around. And so we have 4 aircraft here. All these aircraft were built 70 years ago. They were part of World War II aviation, built in 1944. And these airplanes are part of this tour that the nationwide Wings of Freedom tour brings around, sponsored by the Collings Foundation. These airplanes are self-supporting. So we bring these aircraft to over 110 cities where we offer rides on the aircraft. We offer folks to get a chance to go through the aircraft, and also give chance for people to learn a little bit more about the history of these airplanes from the local veterans that come out and get a chance to work with the airplanes and show them what they did during World War II. We started this effort about 25 years ago, bringing these aircraft around on whistle-stop tours around the country as part of the 50th anniversary of World War II. Then after that 50th anniversary, we had a lot of veterans and families say, "This is such an important thing for you to do. Please continue it as long as we possibly can." We never in a million years would have thought that we would have been able to do it for 25 years, but here we are 25 years later, and we're still working hard and working strong. The airplanes are in wonderful shape. We've got a crew of about 12 people that fly around, work on the airplanes constantly. Like today, we're doing a little bit of maintenance on the B-17. We fly these airplanes like they did during World War II, where we do field maintenance on the airplanes, and every single day is a mission. We're out here 7 days a week, touring folks through the aircraft and doing flights. So instead of dropping bombs these days, our new mission is to increase awareness for World War II history and to allow people to experience what it was like back in 70 years ago. The B-17 behind me, called the 909, is one of 6 that are flying in the world today. Ours was built in 1944 by Douglas Aircraft Corporation under contract from Boeing. Boeing manufactured and designed these aircraft, which was not too far away in Seattle, but there were a lot of them that were contract built for through other companies, because obviously the war effort allowed just about every single factory out there to produce something to contribute to the war effort. The 909 was a aircraft that flew in the 91st Bomb Group as part of the 8th Air Force, and it had the unique total of about 140 missions that it flew during World War II, all those without a turnback. So it was one of the highest time mission scoring B-17s out there. The B-17 Flying Fortress was the first generation World War II strategic bomber. World War II was the first time we ever used strategic bombing, which was targeted bombing of supply or strategic targets like aircraft factories, naval shipyards, U-boat pens, munitions factories, oil depots, that kind of thing, which was meant to cripple the ability for the enemy to do battle from behind the scenes. We weren't dropping bombs on cities or civilian targets. It was pretty much these strategic targets that we were going after. The B-17 was the first of its type to be used in that role from the 8th Air Force, flying out of bases from England. They were flying into occupied France, Belgium, and eventually into Germany when ranges of the escort fighters allowed them to go all the way in. They traditionally flew at about 25 to 30,000 feet in rarefied air with very, very little oxygen in temperatures of minus 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was a very, very harsh environment for crews to fly in an unpressurized, unheated airplane. But they flew in formations of 500 to 1,000 aircraft and dropped bombs on target thanks to a new technology called the Norden bomb sight, which was an optical computing bomb sight, a very early computer that really paved the way for later gun sights and bomb sights that came out later in the war. The B-17 flew all the way through 1945, but after 1945 was pretty much stricken from service. Most of the B-17s were scrapped, 12,500 were built. Only 6 of them fly today because most of them were scrapped at the end of the war. The need for aluminum was much more than the need for archaic aircraft, especially as we were eclipsing into the jet era. So at the end of the war, most of these airplanes saw their fate by the scrapper's torch, and luckily a scant few were kept around. Ours was flying as a fire bomber and actually fought forest fires up until the 1980s. And we acquired it in 1985 and put it back in World War II display condition and been flying it ever since. The other aircraft that we have on display today, the other large aircraft, is the B24 Liberator, built by Consolidated Aircraft Corporation. This was the second generation bomber for the Army Air Corps to be able to do long distance bombing on these aircraft. They wanted longer range, they wanted to be able to carry more. And so the B-24 is brought out as that answer to that. It did have a slightly longer range, slightly larger bomb capacity, and also could fly a little bit faster. It flew alongside the B17 Flying Fortress, also from bases in England, also fought in the North African campaign, Italy, and also flew significantly in the Pacific. The recent blockbuster movie and bestseller book, Unbroken, about the life of Lou Zamperini. Lou Zamperini was a crewman on board the B-24 Liberator that was based out of the Pacific Theater. And so a lot of folks now are beginning to understand a little bit more about the B-24. The B-24 is kind of an overseen aircraft. It really wasn't found in many pop culture books and such because it wasn't covered as much as the B-17 was. A lot of movies were made about B-17 crews and aircraft. B-24 was kind of the unsung hero. And actually more B-24s were built than any other multi-engine aircraft, and that's a record that's still held today. But ironically enough, the B-24 Liberator is the rarest of the airplanes that we have out here today. Our B-24 Liberator is the last of its type currently flying in the world today. Ours only survived the scrapper's torch at the end of the war because of the fact that it was a Lend-Lease airplane that was flown by the Royal Air Force of England. It flew out of the China-Burma-India theater, and at the end of the war, instead of the British taking it back to their bases in England, they just literally left it in a junkyard in Kanpur, India. And when the Indian government declared independence, they went and found these aircraft, put them back into flying condition. So this airplane was actually the first bomber aircraft of the Indian Air Force. Flew for about 30 years in that role until it was recovered by a British collector in the 1970s and was then shipped over here in the United States to us in 1985 after we purchased it. And it went through a literally 3-year restoration. Over 1 million man-hours went into getting the aircraft into flying condition, and it first flew again in 1988. It's been flying with us ever since that time, and it is, at this point, the last flying combat-configured B-24 Liberator in existence, and only one of only about 20 airframes that currently are in any sort of condition around the world today. So it's a very rare opportunity for folks to see this airplane, especially in a small community like Walla Walla, where you would have to go a long distance to see a B-24 Liberator. I think the closest one is Castle Air Museum in Atwater, California. So you'd have to go a long distance in order to be able to see this airplane in person. The other bomber aircraft that we have out here today is the B-25 Mitchell. The North American B-25 Mitchell was a medium bomber. Ours was built in 1944 as well. And medium bombers were usually kind of like the hunter-killer kind of aircraft. They were in smaller formations, did a lot more low-level work and such. They were faster aircraft, weren't as well armored as the B-17 or B-24, but they also had a different kind of mission type. They were flown quite a bit in the Pacific Theater, going against targets like shipping fleets, harbors, that kind of thing, where they would go in, 3 or 4 airplanes at a time and attack a precise target and get the heck out of there. The B-25 Mitchell was also made famous for the fact that it was the aircraft used in the Doolittle raid on Japan, which was the first retaliatory raid in 1942, where 16 aircraft, B-25 aircraft, flew off the aircraft carrier Hornet in April of 1942 in a role that they were never meant to do. They basically flew these airplanes off of an aircraft carrier, which had never been done with a medium bomber this size before, and that allowed them to get closer to the Japanese homeland and did basically a morale-building raid on Japanese cities. Unfortunately, all 16 aircraft were lost. Only one landed intact. All the rest were crash-landed because they ran out of fuel along the way. So it was a very daring mission. But it brought United States morale to a high point at that point, especially after Pearl Harbor, and was kind of the turning point where we started really seeing that we could make this war work for us. The B-20, and oddly enough, the B-25 Mitchell crews that took part in that raid actually were originally based out of Walla Walla and Pendleton originally. They were part of an anti-submarine and anti-shipping squadron that were flying B-25s in the early part of the war. So it's kind of a unique local aircraft to bring back to this. The B-25 is unique for the fact that it flies up to about 200 miles an hour, so it's a very thrilling ride for people to get a chance to go through the airplane and fly. And then the other aircraft that we have out here today is the P-51 Mustang, which is considered by many to be the Cadillac of the skies. It was the predominant fighter aircraft that was used by the Allies during World War II. It was a fast, long-range escort fighter that allowed that was basically escorting the large bomber aircraft deep into enemy territory, where they could fend off the attacking German or Axis aircraft that were attacking the bomber formations. The P-51 was the only one of its type that was able to get all the way into Berlin, which was considered to be kind of the benchmark for most of the bomber crews. If they could make it to Berlin and attack the German homeland, it was considered to be a major, major win for them. The P-51 Mustang is kind of a collaboration, if you think about it. The aircraft was developed by North American Aircraft, an American company, but it was originally built under contract for the British as a fighter aircraft. It originally had an Allison engine in it, which is a low-altitude 12-cylinder inline engine, but only after the British mounted their own Rolls-Royce-built Merlin engine on it did it become an actual wonderful airplane. It actually had the high altitude work, and it could actually fly longer distances because of that. And the Merlin was actually built then on the American airframe. It was Packard Motors actually built the Merlin engine for all the U.S. built P-51 Mustangs after it was re-engined in 1942. Our P-51 is a rare C model that is a dual control aircraft, so it allows folks to actually go up and get some stick time and be a fighter pilot for an afternoon and fly the airplane as part of a ride program that we have here. That's one of the key goals for us, is that we really want to make history accessible for most people. So we want to allow folks to get a chance to either fly on board the airplanes or fly the airplanes, and that's a major fundraiser for us too. We wouldn't be able to do the tour the way we do it if it wasn't for the donations that we receive for the flight experiences for people to fly during the time that we're in each city.